Hi, my name is Victor Cantore. I'm the president and CEO of Amex Exploration, and with me today is Kelly Malcolm. He's our VP Exploration over at Amex Exploration. So Amex Exploration, we have probably one of the biggest drill programs going on in the Abitibi. We've made a discovery, a significant gold discovery in the what we call the Chicobi, the Chicobi belt. Right beside us is the old Normetal mine. It was a rich VMS mine, and basically I can call this elephant country for gold discoveries. There's gold discoveries within the Abitibi greenstone belt all over the place, and I'll pass it on. I'll pass it on to the technical team from here.
Great, Victor. Thank you for the introduction. Really nice to meet you both. I've never. Forgive my ignorance, but this is my first introduction to the company. And, I looked at your share price chart, I looked at your presentation, and it's like, wow, how come I've never heard of you guys? I mean, it's quite a quick story, isn't it? Victor, can you give me a bit of background to kind of how you got to here in the kind of the timelines in a compressed sense?
Sure. Our discovery hole was in late 2018, and at the Perron project. This project was in the company for a very long time. We financed the company very well starting in 2019. Started putting a real good program, a real good drilling program going on, and it has grown. It has grown ever since. Kelly will go over some of the technical factors, but we have a significant gold zone. It's a high grade zone that's goes down all the way to, we found mineralization all the way down to 1.35 kilometers. Within that high grade zone, it's what we call the Eastern Gold Zone. You've got the Denise zone, which one of the press releases that we put out just a little while back. We've actually expanded the strike, almost doubled the strike, and we're very encouraged that we can continue expanding that zone from there. And it was a really great ride. I mean, we've gone. When you look at the market cap of our company, back in 2016-17, we were only a few $1 million. We've peaked at $400 million, and we are where we are today. And hopefully, we'll continue bringing shareholder value.
Yeah, absolutely. And you managed to continue working through the pandemic. The workflow, you were still turning rigs in 2020, 2021.
In Quebec was one of the few provinces that they actually stopped exploration for. It was stopped for a couple of months. It was in late March 2020 till about May 15, something like that. Then we commenced. I believe on site we have not. We really had. We followed all the government regulations and all the protocols. We were fortunate enough not to have any cases. So while there was when it was opened by the government, like, we never had to shut down because of any outbreaks. We were fortunate with that. We followed the government protocols and we went through with it. But yes, the minute everything was opened again, we continued on drilling during the pandemic.
And honestly, to be truthful, during that 6 or 7 week period, we'd made a discovery and we hadn't stopped drilling at all once. Since that discovery hole. So it was actually a nice time to sit back, relax, and take a look at our data and come up with some new ideas. And during 2020 and through 2021, we actually made a bunch of gold discoveries and copper discoveries. So it obviously wasn't a good thing, but it was fortuitous for us to have a little breather and be able to scratch our heads and come up with some new ideas.
Consolidation of, quite often when you're generating data, it's very hard to to stop and actually take it all on board and then plan ahead, because you're so busy dealing with the flow of information. It must have actually been a pretty useful time.
Genuinely was, and all of us were sitting at home bored silly. So you get at the leapfrog and you start scheming pretty quickly.
Kelly, what's your history with the project? I mean, are you an Abitibi guy? Have you been with Amex Exploration for a long time? What brought you to the company, to this project?
A few things. So my first ever job in geology was at the Detour Lake project. So Detour Lake mine, arguably the biggest gold deposit in Canada. And And there, I was involved with the exploration team, so looking for high-grade mineralization to complement the big low-grade system there, which we were successful. We found what will be a million ounce plus high-grade gold deposit, but also learned about the scope and scale of large mineralizing systems such as Detour Lake, and understood sort of the larger framework, or a little bit the larger framework involved in generating a multi-million ounce gold system. Was working on a master's up there. And then I was acting as the QP for Victor actually on Amex in 2017, I think. And I went up to visit Perron, was very intrigued by it. End of 2018, started drilling some holes. Victor's like, you got to get up there, buddy. It's looking pretty cool. Went up to site, and within 2 weeks, I was VP exploration there. So got involved unofficially sort of end of 2017. And formally as of January 2019. Coincidentally, share price.
No, that's great. I hope you got your options at the lower share price. But can you just kind of set the scene for me, geologically speaking? So in the Abitibi, famous granite greenstone belt. Is this a part that's been heavily explored, or is it one of the lesser explored areas of the Abitibi?
Significantly lesser explored. When you look at a map of the Abitibi, and I urge anyone to look at our corporate presentation for that map, you've got the two lower breaks, like Larder Lake and the the Cadillac Larder Lake break, and the Porcupine Dester fault zone, two of which sort of converge together. Along those faults, you have highways. Those highways were not built for no reason. And you have a ton of gold mines and gold discoveries along those highways. Exploration's been easy. Outcrop exposure is much stronger than it is to the north. Going north above those breaks, you have our break, which we call the Chicobi Deformation Zone. Above that, Casa Berardi Deformation Zone. Above that, you have the Sunday Lake break. If you go back to the 80s, there was basically no gold or very little gold found on the Sunday Lake break. Go back to, again, the late 80s, no gold or very little gold found on the Casa Berardi break. Because of the Casa Berardi mine and the Detour Lake mine, exploration has expanded significantly on those northern faults, which has very similar geology to the south. It's got a little bit more overburden, and exploration is a little more challenging. Same thing for us on the base metal mine. People had been looking for VMS mineralization on this break for quite a number of years. There's been very little gold-focused exploration.
And okay, two things. Well, lots of things there. But the Chicobi Deformation Zone, presumably this is a deep crustal suture, which has kind of been a long-lived, fertile structure, which has kind of driven mineralization in a variety of settings. It's manifest in a whole variety of different geological or deposit types on its zone, which is why you've got some copper, why you've got some VMS, and potentially and some gold deposits.
Yes, I agree with you.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
So
Good.
It does show the major, like when you're looking for these huge breaks, especially in the Abitibi and actually throughout Africa and most of the greenstone belts, you need structural complexity, but typically you want to see a big conglomerate package, which most oftentimes marks the major divide, and we certainly have that. In the south, it's called the Temiskaming sediments, the Temiskaming conglomerates, and then on our break, it's the Chicobi sedimentary package. Are the markers of that large structural event.
Okay, and why tell me about the kind of the exposure and the cover in the Chicobi Deformation Zone. Is there more glacial till? Is it a swampy region? Why is there less outcrop there, or how is that manifest? How does it present?
So if you look at a map of central or central eastern Canada, James Bay and Hudson Bay are one of the major features of that map. There's a big chunk carved out of the continent or the country. from that area, there's a huge amount of glacial outwash that occurred over thousands and thousands of kilometers, or thousands of kilometers, I suppose. And you get very little outcrop, very little elevation difference from James Bay basically down to around where we are. On our property, there's a maximum elevation difference of about 25 meters. When you go for a drive, you're driving on a flat surface for the vast majority of our whole project. Certain areas where there's some granitic rocks, you'll get a bit more elevation relief, but I would say it's 99.5% of the property is outcropless.
So it's kind of an Archean peneplain. It's been eroded flat. Does that mean that when you've the exploration that you did was based on geophysics and bottom of till geochemistry?
No, it has not been based on the till geochem. Most certainly it's been based on geophysical information, as well as geochemical information. But we haven't done much base of till sampling, although I do think it's a wonderful idea. One of the problems is it's more clay rather than sort of direct basal gravelly till. So it's a little bit challenging. It's been tried in the past by AMX's previous exploration team, but we are looking at it right now. Actually, what we're doing for the first time in the project history is a property-wide geochem survey. So right now we're doing a black spruce bark survey. So we did a few orientation surveys over the known zones of mineralization, and then did basically a grade across the entire project. We're about 60-70% done that. And then what we'll do is what's called a weak leach survey. The brand name is MMI survey, which is a buzzword that you might have heard before.
Yeah.
So we'll utilize that, try to compare the two, see if we can come up with a recipe for mineralization, and hopefully that can help guide us into some new deposits.
Did you say black birch leach or black birch bark?
Black spruce bark.
Spruce bark.
It's a biogeochem survey. The idea being you potentially will, there's a hummingbird right here. You'll potentially be able to trap some of the ions that are moving up through the groundwater into the tree roots. It's been used actually quite effectively in areas that are undercover. It looked to be like one of the best tools for us to try, so we went for it. We have some students on site, and they're sampling trees.
And you're presumably using associated minerals. You're looking at kind of arsenic or copper or some kind of. You're not looking for the gold ions itself. You're actually looking for the.
No, the gold. The gold is so hard to track. Well, honestly, one of the challenging things about AMX, and one of the reasons that I think it's been so underexplored, is that the gold is quite isolated. When you take an assay of our let's say our high grade zone vein, for example, you see very little arsenic, essentially almost nil, no antimony, no mercury, none of those really mobile elements that you can typically track a system with. We have a really bright geochemist working with us. I actually did my undergrad with him, and he's gone on to work for some consultants, but he's a PhD geochemist. And what he's doing is he's using kind of strange elements to correlate the gold. So he's looking at over those orientation surveys, looking for things like barium. He's had success with as a tracker for gold, even though it doesn't actually form directly with the system. For some reason, in this ionic movement, you get a correlation of these funky elements with gold mineralization on occasion. So we're trying to get the recipe, and then we'll use that recipe to identify some new areas that haven't been looked at.
But, from what I can see from your presentation, you've had great success expanding your mineralized zones and the number of mineralized zones. I mean, so you've got the kind of Perron fault that comes along, and then you've got the Normetal fault along the top. And just looking at the names, you've got kind of Western Perron, you've got Gratian Gold, you've got the Central Polymetallic, you've got the Eastern Gold Zone, which in itself is made up of 6 different discrete kind of mineralized areas, HGZ, Denise, upper high grade zone, E2 gold zone, copper gold zone, Donner zone, the 210. You've got lots of these. You've obviously been successful in finding new mineralization. What have been your vectors? Has it been the drill rig? Has it been a structural interpretation? Has it been the geophysics?
It's dominantly actually so the central polymetallic zone, which kind of kicked off. So that I'll give you a little history on the project. So the Gretienne project was found by I think the first hole poked into it was by Falconbridge in the late 90s. They were looking for base metals. So the predecessor company to AMX, which was called Coleraine Resources, optioned the project, completed its expenditure requirements by late 90s, drilled on the Gretienne for a couple of years, then went down, looked in Mexico at a different project, came back to this in around 2013, drilled to the east of the Gretienne zone and found the central polymetallic zone. That was really exciting. It was a beautiful discovery hole, 20 meters of 5 grams gold equivalent or something like that, with some really nice zinc and copper numbers. And it was encouraging enough that Agnico Eagle, who operates to the south of us, came in and optioned the project for 3.5 years. They had to spend $4 million to earn 51% or so in the project. They did not meet those expenditure requirements, returned the project back to us. The thing that they did was a lot of good geophysical and compilation work. So when we got all the data back from them, once we had the project back, Victor had become CEO in that period. And what the company did was did for the first time ever a full compilation of all existing data, a three-dimensional model of geophys, geochem, drilling, surficial data, and that led us to about 17 targets that we started drilling in 2017. The third drill hole was the discovery of both the high-grade zone and the Denise zone. That was hole PE 1703. The reason that hole was drilled is there was a couple sniffs of gold along strike from it, in the order of 10 grams over 0.4 sort of thing, but nothing of real substance. There was a nice IP anomaly, which was driven by the Denise zone rather than the high-grade zone. And there was a nice alteration halo towards the bottom of some of those holes along strike. And then from there, we started, magnetics has really been our major tool for success for the gold, looking at different structures.
Because the mag picks up the structures, exactly. It shows you where the structure is. It's the mag.
Most certainly. We did a super detailed 25-meter line spacing drone magnetic survey just off the ground that was actually so detailed that we got the maps back and we couldn't figure out, there was all these like little dots, these pimples, and we're like, what the heck are those things? They're like discrete VMS targets. They were actually the drill collars. It was so sensitive that it was picking up individual drill collars across the map. So that data has been really good for us and definitely has helped us identify a bunch of new targets. And then for the VMS minerals, or the VMS targets that we've hit, that's driven by dominantly EM and geochemistry.
And so you obviously have done a structural interpretation on the back of that. What's your, and I see that in your presentation, kind of in your highlights that you're talking about, you're looking about targeting a first mineral resource estimate. What's your, I want to get into the geology, I want to get into the dimensions and all the grade kind of stuff, but you've also, you're doing a big drilling program at the moment. You talk about 10 rigs, you talk about 300,000 meters of drilling. You talk about targeting a mineral resource estimate. Can you just give me, I mean, maybe this is a question for Victor, but what's the kind of the interim plan, let's say for this year and into next year, in terms of what you're actually trying to kind of hang your hat on by the end of the year, or what's your target? It's corporate, kind of technically for the company.
So the 2022. I'll walk it back yet again, but through 19, when we first raised our whatever $5 million, Victor, from Eric Sprott as the lead on that one, really our goal was to prove we had something. That was all we were doing, was drilling on the high grade zone aggressively, up from surface down to about 500 meters. 2020, we decided let's grow this thing. So we started poking holes through the high grade zone into Denise, which actually started netting some really good results. Did some work on the previous Gratien as well as some step outs, found the Grey Cat zone. But really our focus still was on definition drilling and relatively tight spacings, 25 meters of the high grade zone as well as 50 meters on Denise. 2021, we started our first real regional exploration programs. We started stepping out across the project, looking at new areas that hadn't been looked at previously. 2022, we have largely defined the guts of all of the different zones. Our corporate mandate for 2022, or at least my mandate given to me from Victor and the board, is to find more gold, work on the copper zone, and expand and grow our resource, which we've been, I would say, very successful in doing so. If you look at some of our recent releases, the high grade zone, we've expanded the strike length on. We're doing some big step outs to depth. Denise zone, we've doubled the strike length. We think we have the potential to grow it much more than that along strike based on historical results. So the 2022 mandate is build upon rather than define. So the definition is for the most part getting close to being done, and now it's time to grow.
So when you, I always, when I consider resources and drilling, I always say that there are two things you're trying to do. One is you're trying to define the kind of the envelope of the mineralization. And then the other thing you're trying to do is you're trying to understand what's inside that envelope better. You know, you're trying to take it from a geological resource or a kind of a mineral inventory up a de-risking scale where it goes from inferred to, or just even pre-inferred to, you know, what you're doing in the kind of lockdown, which is hypothetically drawing bubbles and thinking, well, maybe this is a shape that we can target, to an inferred resource, and then you go indicated and measured and all of that kind of stuff. But so just to paraphrase back to see if I understand it right, up until about
essentially the opposite of what you're saying.
So, but until 2021, what you've done is you've found you found some zones and started drilling really tight spaced. Then you've gone out and you've found other zones of mineralization, and now you're actually putting envelopes around each of those separate targets that you've identified.
We've basically defined the cores of these different zones and deposits, and are now working on the envelope expansion, extending them, and that's exactly what we're doing right now.
Okay, and you've talked about 300,000 meters of drilling. And I know these are projections, and I know geology is never straightforward, but is that 300,000 meters allocated to ideally drilling out the envelopes?
No, from discovery to present date, so call it beginning of 2019 to current, we've done over 295,000 meters of drilling. The recent capital raise that Victor, I don't know if it was wise or lucky, but did before we had this little pullback in the market, it was wise, gave us lots of additional runway in terms of drilling. So that money earmarks a whole lot of drilling for us. So we can expand significantly beyond that number. And that's always kind of been our thing at AMX, is we're drilling until we find it all. So we've been actively growing and expanding the project to different zones, and I think that will yield quite a substantial resource when it comes out.
Yeah. So Kelly, we just got our new numbers. So basically, the 300,000 meters, that was already fully funded pre this last raise that we did. We are currently at 335,000 meters. So what we're fully funded for. So the 300,000 meters is done. We're gonna have we have planned like almost another 100,000 meters this year, 100,000 meters next year. Inside all that drilling, we should be able to bring on a resource at that point, like something substantial. That's what we're trying to do. So we are fully funded for another 100,000 meters for 2022 and for 2023.
Fantastic. And so, do you think that sometime, I mean, obviously, you're going to want to put out a resource at some stage? Is that a plan for 2023, or is it just, I mean, I also noticed that in your presentation, you talk about, you've got 15 kilometers of structure that is untested or kind of very underexplored. Might you can kind of continue expanding and finding new zones as a strategy? Do your shareholders, are they giving you any pressure to say, give us a resource in 2023, or are they saying just keep going?
We're not really, and I'm sure Kelly's going to have his thought on this also. But from the corporate side, we're not getting any real pressure from many shareholders, because we do share a lot of our drill data is on. Well, not a lot. I think all of it's online. Well, the majority of it is online. So anybody can, with a resource modeling software, can go on and do their own estimate. I mean, the difference between one and another will be your top cut, your cutoff. We think we can build substantial ounces on the Denise zone, continuing going east, as Kelly just said before. We doubled the strike length there, and hopefully we can double it. Hopefully we can double it again. So we're just going to continue going as we're going along, and at some point, yes, we will deliver a. Is it at the end of this year? Is it the first quarter of 2023? We're going to put it out as soon as it's feasible. But as long as you keep coming up with good results and their expansion results as we're doing, I think we're going to be okay on that part.
Yeah, and don't something else to note is that we are always working on a resource. We always have contractors engaged that are actively guiding us and giving us insights, creating wireframes, adjusting wireframes, building new ones, changing parameters, looking at things in lower grade bulk tonnage type stuff. We've got an engineering group engaged. We've got an environmental group engaged, starting to do some preliminary baseline work. So we're advancing, actually, even though it may not be presented to the market, but internally we're always pushing the project forward beyond just by the drill rig, and that's something that maybe doesn't get noticed enough, but it's a very active behind the scenes part of the company that again, and Victor can certainly confirm this, is baking in a lot of value in depending on what happens with the company in the future. I think if you're looking at potential M&A strategies or something down the line, having all that stuff done and prepared and presentable, and showing that there are no issues in terms of environmental, First Nations, permitting, engineering, rock quality, all that fun stuff, to be able to present it is actually quite a significant benefit.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's really useful to have that process going on internally. And in some ways, if you're able to continue to deliver expansion results and good news from your exploration drilling and your growth drilling, that's great. And you probably don't need to produce a resource. However, I mean, we are in this very strange market where valuations are jumping around all over the place. And if it persists if you've got a out of sync valuation to where you think your resource is, I think that would probably stimulate a conversation at the board, which is to say, actually, we need to kind of recalibrate the market's perception of us. And one of the ways to do that is by publishing a resource so that we can show demonstrably that we are trading below our peers on a per ounce basis. But that's a board level conversation.
Yeah, because the other thing that we will do also is bring out, when we put out the resource, what's planned is that we'll do an economic study alongside with it, because the ounces where we are will be worth a lot more than some ounces in some remote place. I mean, you can drive from Toronto or Montreal and just drive straight to the project, and you don't need a 4x4 to get there. And then we can take you to every single drill that's there, to all the drill sites. Again, it's all the roads have been built. You have electricity. You have a town beside you. You have water. Most of our drillers, we're actually in cellular communication with all our drill sites. So it's pretty.
We had a really funny encounter where Victor and I were up on site. We were out at one of the drills. This was last summer, and we had some visitors up, and this little Honda CR-V drives up to the drill rig in the middle of nowhere, and it's this young woman, and she gets out of the car with a bag of McDonald's and a coffee for her driller boyfriend. So it's literally that accessible that she was able to make her way through the woods with McDonald's for lunch.
And the burger was still warm.
The burger probably was still warm, yes.
Good. Kelly, can I ask some kind of geological questions? Can you show me, just kind of talk me through the style of mineralization, kind of grades and tonnages, and not grades and tonnages, but grades and thicknesses? And you mentioned something about drilling through the high grade zone and into Denise. Can you tell me about how the gold is presenting? Is there a lot of pyrite with it? Is it in fractures? No, is it nuggety? What's the variability like? Were you drilling on 25 centimeter spacing because of heterogeneity or structure? All of those good old. Talk me through it.
A lot of questions, but yes, I'm happy to try my best. So the Denise zone, as I mentioned before, was the main target for the discovery of the high grade zone. Fortuitously, we drilled from the north to the south. If we had drilled from the south to the north and just into Denise, to be honest with you, we may not be here talking about the company right now, because the high grade zone itself is largely a blind target. We've done downhole EM, downhole IP, don't get a single blip in terms of a geophysical signature. Reason for that is the whole struct to all the gold, or most of the gold on the project, is a silicious rhyolite. The gold is hosted in quartz veins, so the resistivity contrast is essentially not there. The gold itself in actually all of the different zones is dominantly associated with this reddish sphalerite. There is some pyrite, but for the most part, sphalerite is our big indicator for gold mineralization.
And is that disseminated in the rhyolite, or is it in the quartz veins? And
it's within the quartz veins, and it acts like you would imagine pyrite would within the quartz veins. So you get like these sphalerite grains or sphalerite seams or chunks and crystals, and then around the margins typically is where you're finding, or interspersed throughout the crystal, but still as free gold, is where you're seeing that gold, which is what you'd normally see with pyrite or pyrrhotite in a conventional high-grade gold system.
And you've done some petrography, so you can see it in thin section and reflected light, so you can actually see how it presents. And it's not in the matrix; it's definitely along fractures and fracture fill.
Without question, it sits free in quartz very often. Sits at the margins of pyrite grains. It sits within sphalerite cracks and along the grains. But we've done met work, and honestly, the numbers for gravity recovery were truly spectacular. Better than on our worst composite, better than 70% via gravity. So that is free gold, and that was on a 4.5 gram composite. So not crazy high grade, but still all the gold did come out and liberate as free particles for the most part.
And you talk about quartz veins, but you also talk about mag and structure being so critical. So are these quartz veins kind of fracture parallel? Is there a kind of what are you in a brittle ductile regime? What's the environment?
Multiple structural regimes. I'm going to pull up. I'll just to give a little bit of context. I'll pull up my leapfrog model just because you'll see the differentiation of these gold systems. So for context, I'll just put on a geology map. Turn it up.
So hang on, are these all? Did you say you drilled from south to north or from north to south?
North to south. So the Younging direction. So actually I was mentioning the sediments before. Yes. That blue package here at the large Chicobi fault is the major. That's the major structural feature. So that's the conglomerate sediment package to the south. And then the older rocks are up here, this rhyolite caldera, and then we trend from older to younger. The neat thing about that is along this fault here, and if I put on a different map for 1 second. Okay, so rhyolite caldera, older, younger, big sediments. VMS mineralization occurs at the top of this rhyolite package in this blue horizon. Gold occurs within this lower rhyolite unit, or at this top of the caldera, whatever, secondary pulse of rhyolite with different chemistry. And we have this andesite that's basically underexplored or almost not explored, and then our sediments. So in terms of looking at the actual mineralization itself, actually even these high grades work very well. So what we're looking at is gold grades. Let's make this a little bit translucent. Okay, so we're looking at gold grades here. Everything in pink better than 20 grams per ton. We've got our Gratienne zone over here, Grey Cat, central polymetallic zone, Denise zone, which, as you can now see, is starting to expand in a big way to the east. High grade zone here on this orientation.
Okay. Yeah.
Then we get our upper high grade zone here, E2 gold zone here, 210 gold zone, Alizé zone. So lots of gold all over the place. But the important thing to note, and I will show it to you right now.
So those look like conjugate structures, and is there low grade material in between?
I beg your pardon?
Is there low grade material to kind of disseminated between? I mean, does this whole thing fall into one envelope? So you've got a high grade bit and a low grade bit, which will give you a kind of a mineable average over the whole thing, or are you going to be targeting?
You nailed it. So that's exactly what I'm trying to show you. If I could just find my northern contact. Here we go. So these are the two dominant faults. We've modeled them out in 3 dimensions. What you can see is that for the most part, the gold hugs this contact. This is the lower grade mineralization runs parallel to this thrust fault. That's your Denise zone, Grey Cat zone, Gratienne zone. High grade zone runs oblique. You can see it trending away from the structure within a dilational opening that occurred in the structural framework. So the high grade mineralization we've identified, and we see that at the high grade zone. You can even see that this upper high grade zone, which actually trends at like you said, like a conjugate Rydell type orientation to the high grade zone. E2 gold zone, the same thing. They all occur within discernible magnetic breaks that trend oblique to the overall or trend at a slight angle from the main structural fabric. So high grade mineralization is being found in these secondary structures, lower grade disseminated mineralization found within these primary structures. And that's the main differentiating factor between the high and low grade.
Okay. Do you in retrospect, do you think you over invested in 25 meter spacing at the beginning?
No. So sadly to say, as a junior company, it's imperative to have good results. So what we did was we first started drilling. It was not cheesy drilling. It was 25 to 50 meter space drilling on a very high grade gold system. If you look at our early results, they were spectacular for the first little bit. As we started defining the pod, we had one drill. It's very slow. After that discovery, we did a financing down at 8 cents. And when December of 2019, Victor, like right?
Yeah, closed in November, December of 2018. That's correct.
And then we did 5.4, 5.6 million at 75 cents
in February.
3 or 4 months later. So in terms of the corporate structure, it worked out very well for us. We were able to define continuity of this gold system, and that's something that did and actually always has differentiated us from from many competitors. The high grade zone it's truly a wonderful. Let me pull some. I'll show you one more trick here. It's a genuinely very, very high grade continuous system. So what I'll do is I'll just slice along the high grade zone. And then I'm going to do some cutoffs and show you how this thing holds together. So,
just talk, what's an average thickness of that high grade zone and an average grade? It's kind of
I would say average would be about average true width, probably 5-ish, 4.5 to 5 meters at around 15 grams per ton.
Okay.
That would be my reasonable guess at the moment. Five at around 15 would be a pretty good guess.
That's and a strike length on it?
About 100, and as you can see, it sort of varies. So we've been doing that expansion drilling recently, but 150, 125 from surface to surface down to 1.4 kilometers.
That's a nice shoot.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful horseshoe.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And that's the beauty about high grade and that thickness is that you've got very nice grams per meter, vertical ounces per meter as you go down.
That's honestly the reason that we're so excited about. There's this, I don't think we talked about it, this subparallel zone, which occurs right here called the E2 gold zone.
Yeah.
Because that would be, if I'll do another slicer just so we can see it, I'll expand it a wee bit. I don't have actually all the drilling loaded in here, but that occurs right around here. So it would be in the same underground. So it's about 100 and where distance. That is definitely not the right hole. I'll pull it up in a second anyways and show you what that looks like on a longitudinal basis. But to have a sub-parallel ore body that also carries better than 5-6 grams per ton will, as you mentioned, add significantly to your ounce per vertical meter count. So we're super excited about that, as we're obviously looking at that as an underground deposit, and to be able to add to that ounce count on a vertical basis will definitively help the economics of an underground system. Yeah.
And when you've got a robust ore shoot like that, it's good because you can get a good production rate for a relatively low tonnage. So grade and thickness really helps.
And it's honestly it's tight as an arrow. It's a perfect sheet. We hit within a meter of our projected depths almost every single time. The RQD, like the rock quality, is very conducive to underground mining. Actually, this is neat too. So to the east of us, there's a past producing mine. This one here, that went down to. So this is only going. They just modeled the first kilometer and a bit. This went down to about 2.4 kilometers, so double the depth of what we've defined already. So we've modeled this in 3 dimensions, just the historical workings. But this mine here went down to 2.4 kilometers, just a few short kilometers away from us. So we had the idea that this chute would be continuous based on the historical and neighboring very deep mineralization. But there were no issues with this rhyolite host rock. So we always expected we would have the same style and the same depth potential. But the actual rock itself, this rhyolite, is very conducive to supporting underground infrastructure.
And the variability within, let's say, that 125 meter strike length, is it relatively consistent? I know it's gold, but
if you take a look at any of our high grade zone releases, it always occurs as there's a core of this very bonanza mineralization On the press release maps, we map it out as anything better than 50 gram meters or 50 metal factor within this pink envelope. Our next one is above 10, and then the one above that is above 2 or something. The actual pink core is probably about 70, 75 up to 100 and something meters of strike, and then it's surrounded by this 25 to 50 meter lower grade halo that definitely still fits into underground mining cutoff criteria. And within that pink modeled zone, I don't know if you've seen some of our standout numbers, but there's some truly bonanza hits within that.
Yeah, great. And so internally, you must already be thinking about, how someone might want to develop it. I know that you've talked about wanting to put out a technical, wrap some numbers around a resource when it comes to it in the future, but you must already be talking and saying, oh, we could have a series of pits here, and then this could be an underground development. Are those conversations ongoing internally?
Been going on for quite some time. So the progression in 19, as we first started hitting, was let's just focus on this high grade shoot and ship it off to one of the mills in the Abitibi. 2020, when we started doing 2019 and 20, we started doing some more work outside of the main shoot. Identified that this low grade stuff we have is very robust as well. Lower grade stuff that we have is very robust. I think it certainly supports a standalone operation now. And just like you said, it would be a series of pits. With coincident or I would think you develop it at the same time, the underground work on the chute. The neat thing about having Denise, which is, I would say, our better lower grade system, so close by to the high grade zone, they basically touch each other so that the low grade zones, or Denise zone's here, and then the high grade zone sort of runs off of it in this direction. As you're exploiting this upper portion of Denise, you're going to be taking the upper portion of the high grade zone, which plunges away from it. So you should be able to get some of that beautiful higher grade mineralization in an open pit as well. And then from there, go underground and start ramping down or dropping a shaft to go after the rest of the chute there.
And it looks from the outset like very simple metallurgy. I mean, you were talking about this very high free gold content, gravity circuit. So you could potentially have a tiny plant if you're going to produce a concentrate at all, because there's going to be potentially quite a lot coming off from the gravity.
Yeah, even in the so that's for the high grade zone, the extreme gravity recoveries, but even on Denise and the Grey Cat zone, we've done the petrographic work, we've done the microscope work, we've done the SEM analyses. We know that the mineralization is the same. We just don't have the metallurgical data to prove it. But I'm of the same opinion as you. It should be a strongly gravity-driven recovery process, and maybe just spit out, like you said, a con at the end and have that shipped off somewhere else. And the neat thing about doing that, of course, is that you'd have potentially a chemical-free plant, which is great. We're operating in an area that has existing tailings already. That past producing mine, there is a large tailings, a dry tailings facility that's since been rehabilitated. Not that anyone wants tailings facility near their town, but this town has been living with one since the 1930s. So it's an area that's definitely open to, I would say, open to mining and open to milling.
Great. Kelly, thank you so much for talking me through the geology. I've learned so much about it. It's always great talking to people rather than just going through a presentation. And no matter how enthusiastic I am, sometimes just kind of the news release is just the eyes glaze over. So no, it's much better to animate it. Victor, you must be really excited. There's lots of news flow coming this year. What's your plan in terms of getting the market back up? You've had this kind of incredible sell-off in the last couple of weeks. What's your approach now? And are your how much of your shareholder base do you know and do you talk to?
Well, The last placement, if I would put on a percentage basis, it would be something like 95% of the placement was done with institutional shareholders. We do update them quite regularly on a regular basis. The share price coming down, it's not an excuse, but it is reality. It's been the general market. We're not the only gold stock that's down right now. We're participating in many conferences. We're out reaching out to retail investors also, like through the Crooks Investor. We're just going to continue on, and we're going to have a lot of flow through, a lot of news flow coming through. The drills are still turning. There's lots of drills turning, so lots of news. We're expecting, we're still expecting success along this belt. As like Jacques Trottier, our executive chairman, like what he was saying, he believes there's gold everywhere there. So I mean, it's gonna take the drill. It's gonna take the drill to tell the tale. So that's what we're gonna keep doing. We're just gonna keep drilling and bringing out news and going out there and talking to both retail and institutional investors.
Well, good luck, and I look forward to seeing the news flow as it comes out, and hopefully meet you one day at one of these conferences.
Absolutely.
Your pleasure.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Merlin. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Bye.